Let's talk a little bit about coaxial cable and fiber optic cable. Coaxial cable is another way to transfer data over the network. Generally, you're going to use twisted pair, and we'll talk about that lesson later in this lesson in more depth. But sometimes you might use coaxial as well. Coaxial cable has a single conductor surrounded by an insulating material, which is then surrounded by a copper screen and finally an outer plastic sheath. Some network technologies still use coax. And there are two types of coaxial connectors you should know for the exam. The first is the F connector, and this is more common. For example, cable internet connections use coaxial cable, also known as quad shield coax cable, RG6. And the F connector is the screw-on connector that you'll connect to the cable modem. That's the same thing that you use for your cable TV, or if you have a satellite connection or an over-the-air antenna. All those use those F connectors. Let's show an example of that here. So here we have our coax connector. This is the F connector that we spoke of. It's a screw-on connector, and here's the pin. That's the actual wire for transmission right there. And this turns right onto the port on the device in question. And here we have a cable modem. And it's not really a typical modem like an old school dial-up modem. It's a cable internet access device. But here's your port. That's going to be your RG6 F connector port. And so this guy is just going to screw right onto that. And this cable comes from your wall outlet or from your network interface device from your provider. And usually these cable modems are the property of the provider, so this is part of their responsibility. And once it gets past this cable, though, then it's your responsibility. And generally, these connect via RJ45 to your switch or your 4-port router. So you'd get yourself your twisted pair patch cable, connect one end to the cable modem, and the other end to the internet port of that switch, which is going to be the blue port. And again, this is a Soho 4-port router. It's an AC 1750 sort of all-in-one device. And then you can connect your other computers here or connect them wirelessly. That's up to you. So that's your standard internet connection for a small office or a home office, or most homes nowadays. A lot of people will buy these. And the other type of connector you want to know is the BNC connector. And this is a screw-on connector that was used with older coaxial cabled LANs that had RG58 as the standard. And that's pretty much a thing of the past. This was used with older bus and ring topologies. It's on the exam, but chances are you won't see it. And if you do, it'll be in the process of being upgraded. Now, you might also see these connectors used with video equipment, video switching devices, things like that. But those also are quickly being phased out by ports that can handle high definition signal like HDMI and DisplayPort and so on. Know the F connector and the BNC connector for the exam. So let's talk about fiber optic cable. Fiber optic cable transmits light instead of electricity. You know, your twisted pair and your coaxial cables send electricity. That's the medium. Fiber optic uses light. It sends photons over the cable. And so they can send signals much faster and further than copper wires can. And electromagnetic interference doesn't even play into the equation because there is no electricity. Plus, fiber optic cables are difficult to splice into, unlike copper-based cables. So it's tougher to eavesdrop on a fiber optic conversation. So it's considered a secure type of cable. It's extremely fast compared to copper media. It can be 10, 100 times faster just due to the physical properties of light. Let's talk about single mode versus multi-mode. The single mode fiber is used over longer distances. Let's say you want to connect one building in a campus to another building. You might use a single mode cable. And this has fibers that are somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 microns in size. That's millionths of a meter. It's microscopic. And you can use that for very high speed transfer of data from point to point over long distances, kilometers, even thousands of kilometers. And again, 8 to 10 microns in size. The multi-mode fiber, which is more common, is the kind you'll see in the server room or even maybe in a campus run. It can go about 600 meters maximum. So you might go from one server room to the next, or from one server to another, or from one fiber switch to another. This guy has fibers that are either 50 or 62 microns. So it's a bigger fibers and doesn't send the data as far, but can still support a gigabit and 10 gigabit networks easily. A couple types of connectors are ST, SC, and LC. And here we have on the top, we have the ST connector. That's a screw-on connector. And on the bottom, we have the SC connector, which is a snap-in connector. And the LC connectors are very similar looking to the SC, and they work pretty much the same way. So a little bit about fiber optic cable. The fiber optic cable is going to be used to connect high-speed servers to switches, or high-speed connections between core switches, top-level switches that have to send a lot of data. But they have to have that fiber port. So the switch has to be equipped with that, or if you're dealing with a server, it's got to have a fiber-based network adapter installed. And you're talking more money here and a little bit more difficult installation. So you're not going to see it as often. You're going to see it with the high-speed servers, the high-speed switches, the high-speed point-to-point connections between server rooms, but you're not going to see it from one system to the server room. You're not going to see it from a desktop computer or a laptop computer usually. So you just want to know the basics for fiber optic cable and the basics for coax cable for the exam. And that's it for this sub lesson.